All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our annual TALMUD TORAH sponsor for Tafshin Pei 5785, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this year in the schus of Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar, Stephen Teri Czinn, in memory of Teri's father, Dr. Harry Kahn, Tzvi Hersch, Ben Yosef HaKohen, and the Ziv, Lavine, and Behrman families in memory of Mr. Willian Ziv, Zev Shmuel Ben Yisroel, Zichrono Livracha. But so with that, let us begin. We have a lot ahead of us. Emir Hashem. Today's daf is Ayin Ches 78. We are picking up on daf Ayin Zayin Beis 77b, about 15 lines down from the top. So the Gemara says, Rava. We'll say some very interesting cases over here. Rava says as follows. Zarak tzrar b'kosel, v'chazra la'achareha v'harga chayiv. So listen to this case. Literally translated, someone throws, tzrar is usually defined as a rock. Someone throws a rock at a wall, and ultimately, again, it springs back and kills someone. One is chayiv. Okay, so what's the case here? So I will say this is actually very interesting. If you look at Rashi, Rashi is right across to the left. Zarak tzrar b'kosel, v'niskavin laharugas chavero. He has intention to kill his friend. Now, what's the case? V'zarak tzrar v'hika b'kosa v'koach v'chazra mikocho la'achoreha v'hargo chayiv daha nami kochohu. So Rashi points out that we're talking about a case of intentionality, where ultimately, again, so Reuven is throwing the rock at the wall with the intention that it ricochets off the wall in order to go ahead and kill Shimon. So such an act, again, even though the stone is ricocheting off the wall, halacha l'maaseh, this is considered to be the koach of Reuven, and therefore, again, he's going to be chayiv. So the Gemara says, v'tana tuna. So again, we further define this kigon elu hamisachakin bekadar. So what are we talking about over here? This is like a case of those who go ahead and play a game, literally play with the ball. Shahar go b'mezid neharagin v'shogeg golden. If they kill someone intentionally, they're chayiv misa. If they kill unintentionally, ultimately again golos. So I'll say, so what's the case over here? Let's take a look at Rashi. One more Rashi. Kigon elush hamisachakin bekadar shahar go. This is so interesting. Regilin tinogos lahakos hakadar b'kosa b'koach. It was common for children, young people, to go ahead and take the ball, throw it against the wall with immense force, in order that the ball would go ahead and ricochet off the wall and go very far. After the thrower would throw the ball, so the thrower would run to the wall. And what would the goal be over here? The goal would be that someone would catch the ball, and throw it at the runner. Throw it at the runner. So I will say this is like not dodgeball. Isn't it like suicide? Isn't it like what is it? Stickball. No. Isn't it like suicide? Like whatever. It's whatever it is. You know, you throw the ball. Okay, stop. Okay, none of you are correct. So you're going ahead. You're throwing the ball against the wall. Again, the idea over here is you throw the ball against the wall. I know we used to play this when we were little. You throw the ball against the wall. Right. The goal is you throw it as hard as you can because you want the ball to go as far back as you can. You, the thrower, have to get to the wall. Someone catches the ball and they throw it at you. If you get hit by the ball before you get to the wall, you're out. That's it. So in this case over here, there's a smidge of a twist in this game over here, and the thrower is trying to throw it hard enough that it could kill someone. So again, if he has that kavanah, now, because remember again, I will say, the idea, in order to be chayiv for killing someone, there has to be suicide. It's called suicide. That's the name of the game. We played this when we were little. So not the best name of a game, but that's the name. So again, if there's intentionality, and the thrower goes ahead and has in mind that he wants to dafka, like throw the ball with enough force to kill someone who gets it, then if it's b'mezid, he'll be chayiv because he's rotzeach, he's a murderer. If it's b'shogeg, then ultimately again it's galus. Now we'll say, now what's the chiddush over here? What's the chiddush? The chiddush over here is that there is a secondary, what we'll call it is, I want to call it a secondary force, because that would be a little bit dangerous to use that. But there is a secondary presence, right? It's not the pshat that like the thrower, Reuven is throwing the ball directly at Shimon and hitting him. There's a wall. So the interesting kind of idea over here is, I would have thought that the presence of the wall essentially makes it that this is no longer the koach of Reuven. Kamash malon, even with the wall, it is still considered to be the koach of Reuven. And therefore, again, if there's intentionality, Reuven will be chayiv as a murderer. And if it's b'shogeg, he'll be chayiv galus. Incredible. So the Gemara says, b'shogeg golin, pshita. So obviously, if Reuven throws the ball hard enough and it kills Shimon accidentally, that Reuven's going to go to galus, that's obvious. So the Gemara says, you're right. B'mezid neharagin itzrichalei. The chiddush over here is not in the shogeg case. The chiddush over here is in the mezid case. That if Reuven did it intentionally, he goes to galus. What's the chiddush over here? Ma'odetema hasras safeki miyemar dehadre. I might have thought that this is a case of what we call hasras safek. What does it mean, hasras safek? That I might have thought that this was, remember again, in order to be chayiv for a hasra, what do you have to do? You have to go ahead and warn someone with a certain level of definitiveness, right? But again, maybe in this case over here, the ball's not going to go back, the ball's not going to go far enough. I might have thought that it's hasras safek, kamash malon that it is not. Kamash malon that halacha l'maisa, when someone plays this game, they're going to throw hard enough that the ball certainly ricochets back, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, if it's with the intention to kill someone, ultimately Reuven will be chayiv. Incredible. So we'll say, so this is very important for our sugi, because remember again, what's our topic? Our topic over here is well, who's chayiv in saif, right? Who's chayiv in hereg? And the example that we've been giving is one who kills another. In yesterday's daf, what we were focusing on was mitzamtzim, confining someone. If you confine someone, which is direct koach, you are chayiv. Now what the Gemara is doing is branching out a little bit, and even in a case where there is another intervening factor, it could still be considered your koach. So in this case over here, for example, the other intervening factor is the wall. I might have thought that the presence of the wall makes it that it's no longer my koach. Kamash malon, no, it's still considered to be my koach. Incredible. Okay, to which the Gemara says, Tani Rav Tachliva bar Rava, Kamed Rabbi Avo. Kigon elu hamisachakin b'kadar. So again, we're focused on this ball playing case. Shahargu toch arba amos pater, chutz la arba amos chayes. This is interesting. So now Reuven's throwing the ball against the wall. So if Reuven throws the ball against the wall, and again remember, intentionality is everything. If his intention is to kill Shimon, so now the Gemara says like this: if he goes ahead and he kills Shimon within Dalet Amos of the wall, ultimately again he's going to be pater. Outside of Dalet Amos, he's going to be chayiv. So what's the pshat over here? So first of all, take a look at Rashi. Rashi again is right across to the left. Rashi says, "Kigon ilam misachakim b'kador shahagu toch Dalet Amos p'turin em haya hamuka omed b'soch arba amos shal kosel v'lo speak alachs ra Dalet Amos ad shematzasa v'hargasa pater hazorek migalus." So again, this is talking about over here, b'shogeg. Say if Lamaisa Shimon was standing within Dalet Amos of the wall, Reuven will be pater. More than Dalet Amos of the wall, Reuven will be chayiv. What's going on over here? What's the case? Right? If at the end of the day, Reuven did not want the ball to go further than Dalet Amos, if he didn't want it to go further, right? Afilu portanami. Then even if the ball went less than Dalet Amos and killed Shimon, ultimately Reuven should be chayiv. But again, if at the end of the day, Reuven did not want the ball to go farther at all, wanted to ricochet at all, afilu tumanami. Then even if it went more than Dalet Amos, what's the case over here? The Gemara says, Amar le stam misachakin bekador kama menach nechalei. In general, when people play this game, right, halacha l'maisa, the goal is what? The goal is to throw the ball, and what does the thrower want? What does the thrower want? The thrower wants the ball to ricochet back as far as possible. So therefore, again, what the Gemara is suggesting is like this. If the ball only goes less than Dalet Amos, then that's, again, that is not a fulfillment of the desire of the thrower. and therefore if something happens, ultimately again the thrower will be potter. If the ball, however, ricochets dalet amas or more, that is a manifestation of the intent of the thrower, and therefore halacha l'maisa, he will be chayiv. Okay, now we get to the kunst of this, to which the Gemara says, Amar lei, Lememra, Tibichi hai gavna kolchohu. Now, what's the chap of all this? What's the takeaway of all this? The takeaway of all this is that when Reuven throws a ball against the wall with intent, and that ball goes and kills Shimon, ultimately Reuven's chayiv. Why? Because the act of throwing the ball against the wall and the ball ricocheting off the wall is considered to be Reuven's koach. Because also remember again, if we have one rule, you could only be chayiv for killing someone if what? If it's your force. That's why, for example, again, we'll see this more today. All of those other cases we had in the Mishnah. For example, right? I go ahead and Reuven ties Shimon up at night, even though the sun's going to rise the next morning and kill Shimon because of heat stroke. Reuven's not chayiv. Why? Because the death force is not there. It's not his koach. He incites the dog against Shimon. Not chayiv. It's not his koach. The takeaway from all of this is throwing a ball against the wall. The ball ricocheting against the wall and killing Shimon is considered to be Reuven's koach. To which the Gemara says, really? Is that really considered to be Reuven's koach? After all, listen to this. Very interesting case here. Hamakadesh v'nafal kiddush al yado o al hatzad v'achar kach nofel l'shokes puzzle. So I'll say, very interesting case here. Paraduma. How do you create parad? Remember again, how do you create the paraduma concoction? You take the red heifer, you go ahead and you slaughter it, you burn it, you create ash. You then mix that ash with spring water, with mayim chayim. Right? You go ahead and afterwards, you take that, you mix it, then you sprinkle it. Now, interestingly enough, the halacha is the ash has to be applied or has to be added with the koach of the individual. Right? If the ash drops in by itself or doesn't come in with the koach of the individual, then the entire concoction is invalid. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Hamikadesh, first of the intermediate, wide lies in Rashi. Hamikadesh, mechatas be'efer nisinas efer alamayim, kari kiddush, kiddusam sex good. So we'll say, so now what happened in this case over here? In this case, right, we'll call him Reuven, has the ash. The ash goes ahead and falls out of his hand, and what happens? It hits against his hand and falls into the water. Or for that matter, again, it falls on the side of the utensil with the water and then falls in afterwards. What's the halacha? Puzzle. The concoction is puzzle. Why? Because apparently this is considered to be a lack of kolcho. So what do you see from here? That when something comes out of your hand, hits something else, and then goes into the final destination, that's not your koach. Therefore, using that logic, if Reuven throws the ball against the wall, the ball ricochets off the wall and kills Shimon, what should be the halacha? That also should not be his koach. That shouldn't be his koach. To which the Gemara says, what's the case over here? B'shoses. If you look at Rashi says over here, B'shoses, first wide line, ends the first wide line, Lo nitaz mikoach nefila rishona, ela me'atzmo chazer v'shasas miyado l'shokes. Shoses kimo mayim shosin. So we'll say, no, what's the case over here? If you can imagine the case over here is where the ash falls out of the hands of Reuven, falls onto the sides of the kli, stops. Then, a moment or two later, slips in. Okay, that's a very different case. Because in that case, when the ash itself comes to rest, even just momentarily, on the side of the kli, then the koach of Reuven ends, and then the rest of it trickles in afterwards. That's very different than the ball case. Why? In the ball case, there's no cessation of dynamic activity. The ball leaves Reuven's hand, it hits the wall, it ricochets immediately off. So Reuven's koach never stops. So I'll say a very interesting distinction. So even though there's an intervening wall, the fact that there is never a cessation of dynamic activity makes it my koach. The moment that there's a cessation of dynamic activity, i.e. the ash sits on the side of the utensil, even just for a moment, right? You can see it, falls on the utensil, and then just like a second later, slips in, that's no longer my koach. That's no longer my koach. But I tremendous Moshe Haskell in that also. The whole avoda of life. This is why perpetual growth and perpetual movement is always necessary, even if it slows down a little bit. Because as long as I'm always going, it's my koach. It's my koach. Right? So even if it's a little bit slower at times, a little bit faster at times, but as long as I'm always growing, I'm always moving, it's my initial koach. The moment kind of you stop for a moment, that's the moment where your koach ends. The moment where your koach ends, some stuff moves this way, stuff moves that way, but it's no longer your koach. Incredible. So Gemara goes weiter. And then the Gemara says, good. Tashma, another case. Machat shahaya nesuna ala cheres. Very interesting case. You have a needle. Now the needle is ritually impure. Let's say you came in contact with a mace, right? So now you want to go ahead and purify it. How do you purify it? You pour on it, you sprinkle on it from the water of para aduma. Okay, so now what happens? Mayim shahaya nesuna ala cheres. Vihiza ala. So what do you have? So interesting, in the case where I have the tummy needle that is sitting on an earthenware vessel. So now what happens? Vihiza ala. We sprinkle the waters of the paraduma on the needle. Safek ala mechat hiza, safek ala cheres hiza, right? Umitza ala haza also, pasal. So now you sprinkle the water. Now we're not sure again, did the water go on the needle? Or perhaps the water hit the kli cheres, the earthenware utensil, and then splashed back on the needle. What's the halacha? Pasal. Ultimately, again, it's pasal. Now, both say that based on what we learned, that actually should work. Why? Because even if the water even if the water splashed back off the kli cheres onto the needle, that should still be what? My koach. No different than if I throw the ball against the wall and the ball goes and kills Shimon. Right? It's the same idea, but yet over here we see that it's possible. So you see over here that when there is an intervening factor, it's no longer kocho. To which the Gemara says no. Not mitzvah, which means splash back, but matzah. Matzah means Rabbi say that ultimately, again, what we're not sure, if you look at Rashi over here, Rashi says, Matzah itmar, lav loshon mitzvah dehava taza. It's not mitzvah, which means splashing back. Ella loshon mitzia. Kilomar ha'azan imtzisa. What's the case over here? The case over here is where we find para aduma water on the needle. And what are we not sure of? We're not sure how it got there. Did it get there somehow because there are three possibilities. Possibility one is that the water landed directly on the needle, which we're good to go. Possibility two is that the water hit the kli cheres and splashed back on the needle, which would also be okay, because that's kocho. But then there's possibility three. What's possibility three? The water hit the kli cheres and what? Trickled back onto the needle. That would not be good. So therefore, both say these two attempted approaches, both by Paraduma, to kind of diffuse the Gemara's argument, both fell flat. They both failed. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, what we thought originally, namely that kocho will work. In other words, that when you throw a ball against the wall, and that, right, Reuven throws the ball against the wall with intention to kill Shimon, and the ball ricochets off the wall and kills Shimon, halacha l'maisa, Reuven will be chayiv. Even though there's an intervening wall, that is still considered to be kocho. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. So, Itmar, Amra Papa, still similar cases. Haiman de kafse lechavrei, va'ashkele bitka demayo. Listen to this. Reuven ties up his friend Shimon. And he goes ahead and afterwards releases, right, let's say he ties him up by a dam of water, and then afterwards he bores a hole in the dam. His friends, right, bores a hole in the dam, and the water comes and drowns Shimon. What's talacha? So the Gemara says, Girei didehu mechayiv. These are considered to be the arrows of Reuven. Both said we've seen this expression before. Girei didei is another expression for your koach. So this is considered to be the koach of Reuven, and therefore Reuven is chayiv for killing Shimon. So the says, 1 second, hani mili koach rishon. This is only assuming that it's koach rishon. Koach rishon means initial force, which means that there is an immediacy. That when Reuven goes ahead and makes the hole in the dam, the water comes gushing out immediately, and Shimon is right there. However, I'll say, but let's say again, Reuven ties Shimon up, away half a mile away from the dam. But we know that over time, the dam water is going to come and kill Shimon. That's called secondary force. And therefore, again, there will not be liability in that particular case. So we'll say it's very important. Okay. So the Gemara goes right. Zarak Tzrolamala. It's an interesting case. Zarak Tzrolamala. Reuven throws a stone upward. Listen to this. Now the stone does not come directly down. Instead, the stone kind of falls to the side a little bit. Vaharga, and kills Shimon. What's the halacha? Chayiv. Shimon is chayiv. Reuven is chayiv. Reuven is chayiv. Now we'll say, now this is very interesting. We'll say now, what do you see from this case? Reuven is chayiv. Listen to this case. We'll explain just a moment. When is Reuven chayiv? Reuven is chayiv when the stone doesn't come down straight down. He's only chayiv when the stone kind of comes down at an arc. Yeah, this is right. We're like a little bit towards the side. But if the stone were to come directly down, Reuven would not be chayiv. Now listen to this. The Gemara says, my time, what's the reason for that? Mishum de kochohu. Because it's his koach. But I was supposed to say, interestingly enough, the fact that the stone didn't come straight down. You see, when the stone comes straight down, what is that called? That's called gravity. That's called gravity. Gravity is not the koach of Reuven. But when the stone comes down a little bit at an arc, right, at an angle that comes down, that's Reuven. That's what Reuven doesn't contribute to gravity. Reuven contributes to the movement of the stone to a different location. So the Gemara says, my time is shum de kochohu. I kocho tezel el. But once again, the Gemara says, interesting. If halach l'maisa, if it's Reuven's koach, it should just continue to go upward and upward and upward. To which ayin chesed medalef 78a v'ilav kocho tezel esachas. And if it's not his koach, then ultimately, and Rashi says, v'lo kocho tezel esachas tipo miyad kineg davalo litzdadin. Then ultimately, I should just fall right down. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Ella. This is very interesting. Koach kachoshu. So this is not a typical case of kocho, but rather, Rabbi say, it seems that the Gemara is introducing a new category of koach kachosh. What does koach kachosh mean? Diminished koach. Rashi says over here, Ela koach kachoshu, eina koach chazak. So this is not like a strong koach. Ela ktsas koach. Yesh kan v'haydelo azla le'el mishum shekala koach chozek hazrika va'even chozeres la'aretz aval adayin holechas im miksas kocho. So it says, interesting. You're right. So inachinami. Real koach is where the item continues on its way because of your koach. So obviously this is a diminished koach. Why? Because again, Reuven's intent was to throw it up. Obviously Reuven's koach is coming to an end because it's coming back down. But his koach is still felt. Why? Because it's not coming straight down, which would not be Reuven's koach at all, but rather it would just be gravity, but it's moving somewhere else. It's coming down somewhere else. So the fact that it's coming down a little bit at an angle, at an arc, that's Reuven's koach. But again, not a full-blown koach, but rather a koach kitsas. A little bit of a koach. Okay, incredible. So we'll say, it turns out, by the way, that you begin to see that so far, it seems like we have three categories of koach, right? There's what we would call direct koach, which is, Reuven throws an object at Shimon and kills him, okay? Or Reuven holds Shimon down under the water and kills him. There's almost like we'll call it an indirect koach, which is Reuven throwing the ball against the wall with intention that it ricochets off and kills Shimon, chayiv. And then there's almost what we call diminished koach, right? So direct, indirect, diminished. What's diminished koach? Reuven throws it up with the intention that it's going to come down over here. So again, when it comes down at an angle, at an arc, that's diminished koach. Incredible. So what's the interesting case here? He koach b'nei adam b'asara maklos umeis. Listen to this. So 10 people come along and they hit Reuven. They hit Reuven with maklos, with staffs, and he dies. Now, whether they did this, so ultimately, again, whether they hit him at once, or they did it one after the other, they are pater. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says like this. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira Omer, so again, so Tanakama holds that Allah Chalamaysa, whether they go ahead and whether they all hit together or they hit one after the other, ultimately, again, they're going to be pater. Because there's joint responsibility over here. You can't point the finger at one particular individual. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says, no, it depends. If they go ahead and they do it together, ultimately, again, they'll be pater. But one after the other, the last guy who hits Ruvain, he's going to be chayiv. Why? Because one thing is clear. He's the one who actively hastened the death of Ruvain. So Moses, remember, again, in halacha, there is culpability for hastening death. Hastening death is tantamount to bloodshed itself. So therefore, the last guy who goes ahead and hits Ruvain, he is going to be chayiv for going ahead and killing Ruvain. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. This is very interesting. Ushnei mikra echad darshu. Both the Tanakama and Rabbi ben Beseira darshan the same pasuk. Both said, this is fascinating. Listen to this. V'ish ki yake kol nefesh adam. So this is fascinating. So the pasuk is, if a person, listen to the lashon, v'ish, a man, ki yake kol nefesh adam. I will say that kol seems to be a little bit extraneous. If a person will kill the entirety of a nefesh. So what does that mean? So the Gemara says, Rabbanan Savri, kol nefesh, adika kol nefesh. There's only responsibility if what? If you took the entire life. In order for there to be responsibility, one person has to take the entire life. So in this case over here, where you have 10 people involved, one person is not taking the entire life, therefore there can't be responsibility. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Savar, kol nefesh, kol dehu nefesh. Rabbi Beseira says, no. Kol nefesh means any amount of nefesh. If you take any amount of nefesh, there's responsibility. So we'll say, isn't that fascinating? So the Rabbanon, kol nefesh means you're only chayiv if you take a life in totality, but if you're only one of many, you're not chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, kol nefesh, even any amount of nefesh that you take, you are responsible for. Incredible. Amar Rava says, Hakol modim b'horeg es hatreifa. This is very interesting. Hakol modim b'horeg es hatreifa shu pater. Rabbi says, let's talk about our terms over here. Everyone agrees that if you kill a treifa, you're pater. If you kill a treifa, you're pater. Now, again, who's a treifa? Now, if you look at Rashi just in a moment, Rashi says over here, "Hakom odim b'horeg es hatreifa kigon nekav haveshet o karos hamoach." We'll say a treifa is someone who has some type of fatal internal or some type of internal injury from which he will definitely die. Okay, it's very, very, because we're going to come up with different terms. So that's a treifa. So Rashi's example is, his esophagus or his windpipe is cut, or he has some type of hole in the brain, some type of fatal injury from which he is imminently going to die. So listen to this. So Rava says, everyone agrees, if you kill a treifa, you're pater. Rava says, now why are you pater if you kill a treifa? Right? Because in halacha, a treifa is considered to be as if he is dead already. That's halach with the treifa. So therefore, you kill a treifa, there's no liability for that. Begoses bidei shamayim, begoses bidei shamayim, shu chayid. So we're saying, then we have a goses bidei shamayim. Now, what's a goses bidei shamayim? What's a goses? A goses is someone who is dying. But interestingly enough, goses doesn't have to be that someone has an internal injury. What's the typical case of a goses bidei shamayim? Someone is very old, very ill. They're just dying. I always say people just sometimes die of old age. So the person is dying. That's called the goses bidei shamayim. Right? Remember, that's why I want to define our terms, because often people kind of lump goses and treifa together because, hey, they're both imminently dying, but very different reasons. A treifa has some type of internal injury which is 1000% fatal. A goses is just someone who's dying. There may or may not be maybe there's not an injury, it could just be old age, or it could be just some type of illness, something else. But a treifa, again, is an internal injury. So if you go ahead and, everyone agrees, that if you kill a goses, you're chayiv. Rabbi says it's very important. Why? Because a goses is considered to be fully alive in every way. A treifa is halachically considered to be dead. A goses is fully alive. That's why these are major topics in end-of-life issues. So if you go ahead and you make end-of-life decisions that actively accelerate the death of a goses, one could be liable for that. So the Gemara says, "Lo nechlaku ela goses bidei adam." So what's the point of contention over here? Goses bidei adam. What's goses bidei adam? It's very interesting. Rashi says over here, "Kigon zeh shekarov lamos machmas hamakos ela lo aso harishonim treifa." So we'll say goses bidei adam is someone again who, let's say, was injured, has an injury, but not a treifa injury, but nevertheless is dying as a result of those injuries. So what is that person's status? So the Gemara says, Mar medamile the treifa, or Mar medamile the goses. One opinion says, a goses bidei adam is like a treifa, and one says, no, a goses bidei adam is like a goses bidei shamayim. So here we go. Man medamile the treifa, the one who says that a goses bidei adam is like a treifa. My time, what's the reason? My time, why does he not compare it to a gosis b'dei shamayim? Gosis b'dei shamayim los avid b'maisa. Because the gosis b'dei shamayim will say, nothing happened to the gosis b'dei shamayim. There's no traumatic event, there's no injury, no one did anything to the person. That's the definition of a gosis. The Gemara says, hi is avid b'maisa. But that goses bidei adam, something happened to him. Someone did something to him. The one who compares a goses bidei adam to a goses bidei shamayim, my time lo medamile the treifa. Why is he not compared to a treifa? Treifa mechatri simanim. Ha lo mechatri simanim. We'll say treifa is something very specific. Treifa is someone who is injured in a fatal way. Something happened to this simanim. Something happened to this individual. There's a very specific injury that has occurred, and that's why, again, there's liability. Tani Tana Kamid Rav Sheshes. So let's say we had a Tana ultimately, again, who taught before Rav Sheshes, V'ish kiyake kol nefesh adam. If a person will go, as we possibly quoted before, a person will go ahead and literally strike another nefesh adam, lahavi hamake es chavero, ve'ein bo kedei lahamis, ubo achar behemiso shu chayiv. So we'll say, this is very interesting. Reuven goes ahead and hits Shimon. Reuven hits Shimon, but he hits him in a non-fatal way. And then what happens? Right? And someone else comes along. Let's say then Levi comes along and hits Shimon and kills him. Then ultimately, again, Levi is chayiv. And Reuven's pater, to which the Gemara says, what's the chiddush over here? In Mokadei Laham is pshita. Obviously, we'll say, if Reuven delivers a non-fatal blow to Shimon, and Levi comes along, and then delivers a fatal blow to Shimon, of course Reuven's pater. What's the chiddush over here? So what is it talking about? Very interesting. Let's say Reuven delivers a fatal blow to Shimon, but Shimon didn't die yet. And then Levi comes along and delivers another fatal blow to Shimon. That's what? Levi's chayiv and Reuven is not. Whose opinion is this? Ustama Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Right? So what does Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira hold? It's very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's shita is kol nefesh. What's kol nefesh? In order to be chayiv for taking a life, you have to have performed the totality of the act. If you do not perform the totality of the act, only part of it, ultimately, again, you are not going to be chayiv. Incredible. The Gemara says, Amarava, Harig is a treifa pater, so it's just as before. If you kill a treifa, you're pater. So we'll say, this is pretty amazing. A treifa is considered to be halachically dead. And therefore, if you go ahead and you kill him, there is not liability for that. Utreifa shag b'fnei bezin chayiv, shal b'fnei bezin pater. Oh, we'll say, watch this. What happens if a treifa kills someone? See, if you kill a treifa, you're pater. Fine. What happens if a treifa kills someone? What's the halacha? The Gemara says it depends. If the treifa killed someone in the presence of Beis Din will put him to death. If he didn't kill in the presence of Beis Din, the treifa will be pater. What's the pshat? Listen to this. B'fnei Beis Din, my time chayiv d'chsev ubi'ar tara mikebecha. So I'll say, listen to this. If the treifa kills in the presence of Beis Din, essentially, how can Beis Din not act? How can they not act? They have to do something, right? Beis Din saw Reuven kill Shimon. Reuven's a treifa. See, he's dead. He's dead. But how could Beis Din not act when they go ahead and they see someone going ahead and doing something terrible? So Rabbi say, on the other hand, Shalom b'fnei Beis Din, Pater dehavila eidus she'ata yachal. Before we go on to this, what do you see from this? Such tremendous Musar skill. What do you see from this? When you see something wrong, you have to act. You have to act. Sometimes we see things that are wrong. And when I see things that are wrong, it could be I see someone doing something wrong, or I see something that is broken, or I see someone that needs help. And sometimes we say to ourselves, you know what, not my problem. Not my problem. If you see it, it is your problem. If you see it, you have to try to do something about it. You have to try to help. In this case over here, Beis Din sees someone doing something terrible. The guy's a treifa. He's halachically good as dead. I got it. You still have to do something. And I will say, if you see something, do something. Not just say something. If you see something, do something. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says that everything that we see in this world We only see it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted me to see it. And if he wanted me to see it, it's because he wants me to do something about it. Now, it's true. I can't necessarily fix every single problem, but I could somehow be involved in some way. If you see it or if you hear it, it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to do something about it. Beis Din, you saw this guy, Reuven, who's a treifa, killed Shimon, got it, he's a treifa. You still have to try to do something. Incredible. But listen to this. Shalom b'fnei Beis Din. But let's say, Reuven kills Shimon. Listen to this. So Reuven kills Shimon outside of Beis Din. So now what happens? They bring Reuven the treifa to Beis Din. So what's the halacha? Reuven's going to be pater. But do you know why he's pater? Listen to this. It's an edus she'ata yachal azima. Because remember again, in order for witnesses to be believed, they have to have the ability to be made into Eidim Zomin. Now what happens ultimately again with Eidim Zomin? Reciprocal punishment. It's not going to work over here. Why? Because you're testifying about a man who's already dead. So because you're testifying about a dead man, therefore again the witnesses themselves are not subject to Hazama. Well, any testimony that is not subject to Hazama, by definition, is never believed. Fascinating. So he's off on a technicality. So Gemara says, lo shma eidos. Rav says this. Haroveas a treifa chayiv. If one sodomizes a treifa, you're chayiv. The sodomizer is chayiv. Treifa sharava b'fnei beizin, chayshal b'fnei beizin pater. But if a treifa himself sodomizes someone else, then what's the halacha? If he does it in the presence of Beis Din, he'll be chayiv. Not in the presence of Beis Din, he's pater. First white line of both say, b'fnei beizin chayiv dichsibiyatar mekyecha. So in the presence of Beis Din, he's going to be chayiv. Why? Because once again, I will say, how could Beis Din not take action if they see something so terrible happen in their presence? Shalom b'fnei beizin pater. But not in the presence of Beis Din, they're pater. Or I should say, Reuven's pater, the treifa's pater. Why? Because we'll say what? Same thing. Witnesses are not going to be believed to testify vis-a-vis Reuven. Why not? Because it's a testimony that is not subject to Hazama. Why not? Why not? Because you're testifying about a dead man. So because you're testifying about a dead man, therefore again, there's no Hazama possibility. Therefore, halacha ma'aseh, they're not chayiv. The Gemara says, 1 second. Hasul amlis, same case. Why do you need both the case of sodomizing, right, and the case of murder? It's the same yisod. To which the Gemara says, "Hainuhach haroveas hatreifet shricha." You're right. The chiddush case of Rabbi say is actually one who sodomizes the treifa. That's the chiddush over here. The Gemara says, "Why?" It's shrichale. Mal detema lehavi command mishamish b'meis v'lipater. I might have thought that sodomizing a treifa is like sodomizing a corpse. And I was saying, now what's the halacha when you sodomize a corpse, right? So if you don't know, it's okay, by the way, right? I'm actually happier you don't know, right? I was saying, so what is the halacha if you sodomize a corpse? Ultimately, pater. Pater, not good, right? But lamaisa, there's no liability for that. So I might have thought that sodomizing a treifa is like sodomizing a corpse, and therefore again halacha lamaisa again there's no chiyuv there. Kamashwan the mishum hanohu va'isleano. Kamashwan know that as much as the treifa is halachically considered dead, but technically speaking it is still considered to be relations with a human being, and therefore again there's liability for that case. Rava says as follows: Edim she'idu b'treifa v'hozmu einei ragin. Well, listen to this. So witnesses who testified about a treifa and were then made into Eidim Zomamin are not put to death, which is what we just said before. Eidei treifa shehuzmu ne'ragin. Now listen to this. So witnesses who testify about a treifa and then are found out to be liars are not put to death because again they're testifying about a dead man. But witnesses who themselves are treifas, right? The witnesses are themselves are treifas who testify and are then found to be liars, Eidim Zomamin, can be put to death. Ravashi says, no, afilu eidei treifa shozmu einei ragin, lefi she'einar bezomamei zomamin. No, even witnesses who are Eidim Zomamin, even witnesses who are treifas cannot be made into Eidim Zomamin. Why? Because listen to this. In order to be made into Eidim Zomamin, the witnesses who made you into Zomamin themselves have to be made into Zomamin. Remember again, how do you become Eidim Zomamin? Right? Witnesses show up, they testify about something. Then what happens? A second set of witnesses say, you cannot have seen that because you were with us at that time. Well, in order for witnesses to be made into Zomamin, the witnesses who make them into Zomamin also have to be able to be made into Zomamin. But the Zomamin witnesses who are treifas can be made into Zomamin. Why? Because the witnesses that they're testifying about themselves are considered to be halachically dead. So because the mazimim, The witnesses who make them into Zomin cannot themselves be made into Zomin. Therefore, on a technicality, they can't be put to death. Okay, incredible. Rava says, short treifa sharik chayiv. Listen to this. What happens if Reuben has a shar, and Reuben's shar is a treifa? It's a treifa, right? Ultimately, again, and Reuben's treifa shar kills someone. What's the halacha? It's chayiv. V'shar sha'adam treifa sharik pater. But if the owner is a treifa, then ultimately, again, the owner is not liable. If the shar is a treifa, the owner is liable. If the owner is a treifa and the shar kills someone, he's pater, which again, I will say makes sense because the owner is considered to be halachically dead. My time, what's the reason? Amrkra, hashari yisakel, v'gam ba'alav yumas. The pasuk says, the shar will be stoned and also his owner will be put to death. Koleicha de karina be v'gam ba'alav yumas, karina be hashari yisakel, v'koleicha de lo karina be gam ba'alav yumas, lo karina be hashari yisakel. So we'll say, so essentially it's a combination. Wherever the owner could be put to death, that's when the shar can be executed. But if the owner can't be put to death, then the shar is not executed. And therefore, in this case, if the owner is a treifa, the owner can't be put to death. So because the owner can't be put to death, the shar can't be put to death either. Rashi says, no, afilu shar treifa nami sharak pater. Even if the owner is totally fine, but the shar is a treifa, you also can't put the shar to death. Why not? My taima. Kevan deilu bailim havu ptiri shar nami pater, because essentially Rav Ashi is going to say like this: any case where the owner himself would be pater, right? The shar would also be pater under similar circumstances. So since the owner would be pater if he is a treifa, so therefore halacha l'maisa, the owner will also be pater. Since if the owner were a treifa would be pater, so too if the shar is a treifa, the shar will also be pater. Okay, incredible. Shisa was like Caleb. So Amar Rav Bar Yaakov, Kishatim Zal Rabbi Yehuda Aras Nachash Ben B'Shinafu Omeid Lefichach Makish B'Saif in Nachash Pater. So we'll see. Remember again back in the Mishnah, what happened in the Mishnah? We had the interesting case of what happens if Reuben takes a snake. He holds the snake's mouth open and he takes the snake's fangs and he plunges it into Shimon's hand. So what's the halacha? So in that case, again, Rabbi Yehuda held that you're chayiv, and the Chacham said that you're pater. Now what's the logic? The Gemara says. So Rav Acha says like this. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what we have to say is as follows: that in a snake, the poison, the venom, is already on the tip of the fangs. It's already there. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, essentially, when Reuven comes, Reuven is directly killing Shimon by inserting the fangs of the snake into the Shimon's hands. And therefore, again, makish b'sayif, ultimately, again, Reuven is going to be chayiv, right? Liable to death by beheading. V'nachash pater. But ultimately, again, the nachash is pater. You don't do anything to the nachash. Why? Because the nachash is like a sword. Nachash didn't do anything because the venom is just already right there. It's already present. According to the Chachamim, aras nachash me'atzma maki. No, it's not true. A snake decides to produce its own venom. And therefore, even though Reuven's taking the teeth of the snake and plunging it into the hands of Shimon, it's the snake that's producing the venom. And therefore, it's the snake that's killing Shimon, not Reuven. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa. Therefore, the Gemara says, "V'aras nachash mi'asmo humaki lefichach nachash beskila v'amakish pater." Therefore, halacha l'maisa, again, the snake is going to be executed, but ultimately, again, Reuven is technically pater. I'll say, by the way the Rambam Paskins halacha l'maisa, Rambam Paskins ultimately like the Chachamim, that we don't view the venom as being there on the tips of the fangs of the snake, and therefore we view this case, even though Reuven himself is taking the snake and putting it into the hands of Shimon, we view that as the snake killing Shimon, not Reuven, and therefore technically speaking, the snake is liable, but Shimon is not, and therefore Shimon will not be executed again, gets off on a technicality. Again, I will say, obviously very bad, but Lamaisa again, that's the halacha. Mishnah, Hamakis Chavero, Bein be'even, bein be'egrov, v'amdu l'misas. Well, it's an interesting case over here. Reuven hits Shimon. He hits Shimon, right, either with a stone or with his fist. And now what happens? We'll say Shimon doesn't die immediately, but Beis Din says, okay, Reuven definitely delivered a death blow. In other words, he definitely injured him enough that he's going to die as a result of this injury. Okay, then what happens? The Heikel Memashahaya, Ula Achmikan Hichbidumes. Interesting case of it. Then what occurred? Then Shimon Baruch Hashem had a shtickle recovery, right? He got a little bit better, but then ultimately he succumbed to his wounds. So what's the halacha? So you see what's interesting in this case? So again, Reuven injured Shimon, and Beis Din saw, okay, this was an injury that definitely could result in death. Then what ends up happening? Right? Shimon has a shtickle refuah shlema, right? But then ultimately he dies. So what's the halacha? Now we'll say when we say he dies, like not that he gets hit by a bus, right? In other words, he died like literally we see as a result ultimately again of these injuries. But again, in the middle there was this little bit of a refuah. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Yehuda Gemara says chayiv. Tanakama says ultimately again, Reuven is going to be chayiv for killing Shimon. Rabbi Nechemiah Omer Pater Shagalayim L'Davar. Rabbi Nechemiah says no, he's Pater. Why? Ragalayim L'Davar means there's some proof. Some proof that what? Some proof that maybe Shimon's death wasn't solely the result of the injury he sustained from Reuven, since he did have a little bit of this refuah shalema. Okay, so let's analyze. Tanabanon as Udarsh Rabbi Nechemiah Im Yakom Vis Halech B'chutz Am Mishanto. So the pasuk says Reuven injures Shimon, and then what happens? Shimon goes ahead and gets back up. He walks outside al mishanto, and the Gemara says over al mishanto means of his own strength. So what's the halacha? 78a v'nikah makeh, and therefore again Reuven does not have liabilities. The Gemara says what? So we'll say, why does the Torah have to tell me that if halacha l'maisa Shimon recovered, that Reuven is not killed? Isn't that obvious? If Reuven injures Shimon, right, hits Shimon, Shimon's very badly injured. But then Baruch Hashem, Shimon goes ahead and he's up and about and he's walking in the marketplace of his own volition. So Torah says, okay, we don't execute Reuven. Obviously don't execute. If Shimon's there walking around in the marketplace, of course you don't execute Reuven. What's going on? We'll say, here we go. Elo, zeh shamdu alamisa, vehekel mimash shahaya, ula'achar kach hechbid umeis shehu pater. Rather, we'll say what the Gemara says, what's coming to teach us is as follows. That if Reuven injures Shimon, and Beis Din says this was the type of injury that could have caused Shimon's death, but then Shimon has a shtickle refuah, and as a result of that refuah, what happens? Baruch Shimon has a little bit of refuah, and then afterwards, he succumbs to his injury, that Reuven is pater. The Reuven is pater. Essentially what the Gemara is saying, what the pasuk is teaching me is, if after the injury there is a shtickle refuah, there's a little bit of a healing, even if Shimon subsequently succumbs to his injuries, Reuven is going to be pater. The Gemara says, V'ra'banan, so we'll say that's the Tanakama. What did the Rabbanan do with this drasha? This is very interesting. No. What it teaches is like this. We'll say in any case of injury, right, where Reuven injures Shimon, and now again we're not sure what's going to happen. Is Shimon going to die? Is he going to recover? Beis Din incarcerates Reuven until we see what happens with Shimon. Right? So that's the halacha. We incarcerate Reuven until we see what's going to happen with Shimon. Rabbi Nechemiah, Chavisha Minale. Where does Rabbi Nechemiah learn out incarceration? We've spoken about this many times before. In the Jewish legal system, there is no concept of incarceration. There's no jail. There's no jail in the Jewish penal code. Why? Because Chazal and Chosh Baruch Hu understood. Chazal understood a long time ago, punishments are meant to be rehabilitative. That's the goal. Right? Either rehabilitative or they provide atonement. So either they allow you to come back a functional member of society, or ultimately, again, you can't come back to society, we'll execute you, but the punishment atones for your sin. So in that light, locking someone up in a cell and keeping there for prolonged amounts of time has zero rehabilitative effect on a person. Right? This is not a chiddush. Torah understood this right from the beginning of time. That's why there's no concept of incarceration. The only time we find incarceration is when we don't know what to do with a person. So for example, the Gemara is suggesting over here, Reuven injures Shimon. Is the injury going to result in death or not? We got to hold them. We got to hold them until we figure out what to do. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Nechemiah, where does Rabbi Nechemiah learn out the concept of incarceration? Yalav b'Mekoshesh. So also there was a case of Mekoshesh, right? Mekoshesh was the guy who gathered water, chopped wood on Shabbos. He publicly desecrated Shabbos. So remember again, the pasuk says, Mishmar, they incarcerated him. They didn't know what to do with him. So there he learns out incarceration. So why don't Rabbana also learn out from Mekoshesh? Maybe the Gemara says, Mekoshesh barktalahu umoshe lo haba yada katle b'may. No, Mekoshesh was different. The reason they incarcerated the Mekoshesh is they knew that they were going to execute him. What didn't they know? How to execute him. Lafuke hai delo yadinan I bar ktalahu I lav bar ktalahu. That's different than in this case, because in this case, when Reuven injures Shimon, we don't know what to do with Reuven. Right? Is Reuven a murderer? Is Reuven not a murderer? That's a different kind of incarceration. Rabbi say, we'll stop over for today. We'll pick up. So we're going to pick up again with this sugya of incarceration tomorrow, which is really quite interesting. Rabbi say, excellent job. Excellent job. Just remember, sometimes it's not about where you end, but it's about where you began. Right? So look at where we began, I will say, and again, in that light, tremendous accomplishment today. Shkayach, everyone. We got the details. Yeah. All right, let's have a great day, everyone. Shkayach, everyone.
When I was a little boy, we used to play the game. It was off the wall.
Off the wall.
Okay, and the trick was you had to put it off the wall and you aim for somebody's feet because they couldn't reach it. But anyway.
Yeah. This is extreme off the wall.
Yes.
Yeah. Different darga.
You should have asked a New Yorker. I don't know why we were at a group.
We played this in New York. No, I'm saying, I remember it was called
anyone who's not.
When I was young,
You should just cancel anyone who's not from New York.
Suicide. Yeah, because the goal was to try to hit the person running with the ball as literally as hard as you can. It was like a little blue ball. It was like those bouncy balls.
Those paintball, fancy paintball. It's nothing new on this. True.
I hope it was helpful.
It was very helpful.